Good morning and welcome to the Crazy Canuck Truckin' Podcast. I am one of your co-hosts. I am the Size Matters Dakotan Bridget. I am here with
Crazy Canuck Dave. Hey, Size Matters. It's good to see you again. It's good to be talking to everybody on our podcast again. What do you think we have going for today?
I have no idea. So here's the fun part of today. First of all, we normally don't record earlier in the morning, but we are. So there are coffee cups full. My teacup is ready to go, and we're all going to have a good time having this discussion with our guests today. And I just want to remind folks that as they listen, if they think of questions or comments, they can go to crazycanucktruckin@gmail.com and leave us all sorts of messages. But even better, you can follow us on any social media platform, also using Crazy Canuck Truckin'. So I feel like today, when we're starting out, everybody's just kind of getting rolling. Today is a great day to call it a 1017. This is urgent business. We want to get this done. Today is a deadline for me over at my regular day job. So I'm going to maybe feel a little panicked from time to time, but our whole discussion today, I think, will probably be urgent with our guest. Whoever that may be, Dave, who is it?
Well, I want to highlight something first, Size Matters, and that is that when you say we want people to like and share and comment, we really mean that. If you like what we're doing for you, then please send us your comments. Tell us what you like, what you want to see more of, whatever. And that's what keeps us going and keeps everything interesting for everybody. So we have today somebody that I have known for some years, and actually in my regular job as a truck driver, then I do some freelance writing, and he is my editor actually, and which is pretty cool. But I've known James Menzies for quite a while. Welcome to the program, James. Thank you for coming on with us.
Thanks, Dave. It's good to be here. As I was saying beforehand, it's not something that I'm used to. I'm usually on the other side doing the interviews and asking the questions. But in Size Matters, you mentioned the coffee cups. This is one of my favorites. It says, trucks are virtually everywhere, which the last year and a half has been certainly true with so many events. And this was from the Work Truck Show, which was virtual this past year. So they sent that out to some of the press and the attendees.
And that's good too, James, because in my background, it looks like I'm virtually in my truck.
That's right.
You saw me earlier and I'm sitting in my office, but
you had me fooled. I thought you were in your truck.
To be honest, he's just all sorts of fancy. I can't figure out how to do all that stuff. I'm just trying to make sure that the sun isn't in my eyes when I'm doing this.
You just want to show off all your bison gear. That's what that is.
Is not wrong. Not wrong.
So, James, the first time I remember coming across you was Truck News Days. Western Canada Truck News, or Western, what was that called actually?
Truck West. We had
Truck West, right?
Yeah, we had two magazines at the time, Truck News and Truck West, that had been around for many decades. And yeah, I started my career in trucking in Calgary, and I just happened to be in Calgary. I didn't go there for the job. I'm from Ontario, but I wanted to change the scenery, so I moved to Calgary. And I had a long history that we get into, if you would like, with the editor at the time at Truck News. And he said, you know what? I was out of work, and he said, there's probably a lot that you could be writing about for our Truck West magazine in Calgary. And my very first assignment was crawling into the back of a livestock trailer as they were filling it with pigs. And I thought I was going to get trampled to death, but I wanted to get a unique shot. So I emerged from that trailer, smelling filthy and smelling like pigs. And I was hooked. I thought, this is pretty cool. It's better than going and taking a picture of a check presentation with the local newspaper.
Size Matters, you got a farm background. You know about pigs. Can you imagine sending somebody, a young journalist, into the back of a pig trailer?
They did that on purpose, right? That's what I was thinking the whole time you were saying that, is they did this to you on purpose.
That was all on me. That was all on me. That was me wanting to get a unique shot. And it was my idea. And frankly, I'm surprised that the truck driver let me do it for fear of liability. But, it's Western Canada. It's farm folks. No. Defend for yourself.
Yeah, they would have been like, you want to come in? Then go right ahead.
Right.
Here's a paddle. Here's a board. Help load them.
Sure. At least it wasn't bison or something.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe. I mean, we're a friendly bunch. Oh, wait, you mean the animal?
The animal.
Yeah. So that editor, I think I still know who you're talking about, and
Oh.
he's actually John G. Smith, right?
Well, no, we've got to go back a little bit even before
Even
that.
further.
Even
Oh, right,
further.
right, right.
So when
Yeah.
I was,
Yeah.
I took journalism in Loyalist College, and John G. Smith, who today is the vice president of editorial for Newcom, and my boss at the time was the editor of Truck News, and he came in and he was a graduate of Loyalist, and he came in to speak to us about the virtues of the trade press, because we all had big stars in our eyes, and we were going to go work for the Globe and Mail and the Toronto Star and the Wall Street Journal. And we all kind of snickered when he said that, you should consider opportunities like being the editor of a trade magazine like Truck News. It wasn't in our interest. My best friend in college, who I graduated with, John Kern, he ended up getting a job after we graduated up in Timmins at the Daily Press. And I went up there shortly after him, and we were working together up there. And it was a bit of a sweatshop. It was the only non-unionized southern paper in Canada at the time. And we were working long hours and writing about 15 stories a day. And then John G. Smith suddenly posted an ad for an assistant editor at Truck News. So John Kern and we both decided that we would apply, no hard feelings. Well, I didn't get a call. My friend John Kern got a call and ended up getting the job. So shortly after that, John G. ended up taking the job with another magazine, a .com magazine, so you can imagine what came of that. However, John Kern was promoted to editor, and then it was John Kern who actually hired me to be an editor out in Western Canada.
Right, right. Very cool. So John G. Smith, he helped hook you. I can imagine that would have been quite an experience. Like size matters. When you were in university, what would you have said if somebody came to you and said you're going to be an agronomist? Because that wasn't your original thing,
Oh,
was it?
no, that wasn't my original plan. But how many of us took the original plan that we had when we were young and stuck to it? No one. None. Very few of us have done that.
Hey, I'm still driving a truck.
You are, but are you doing all the things that you expected you would be doing?
Good point.
Thank
Yeah.
you. There we are. So speaking of driving a truck though, but James, didn't I hear you say something earlier about you had a little bit of behind the wheel experience as well?
Not at that time, I didn't. So as I started writing about the industry in Calgary, about a year into that, I remember getting a call from a guy that ran a training school there. Kevin Agar was his name, and he ran WT Safety in Calgary. And he took issue with something that I wrote, and he said, you know what? Really, to do your job, you should have this behind the wheel perspective. And I said, well, I don't know if I agree with you, but I don't know if my company will pay for me to get licensed. And he said, well, you know what? I'll do it for free, because I see it as a service to the industry to have you better informed for the industry that you're writing on. And I'm grateful to him to this day, because he got me trained on an 18-speed Kenworth and showed me the ropes, and I got my license. And that, I think, is when I began taking the career a lot more seriously, because suddenly I realized what went into doing the profession, and I realized the professionalism of the people behind the wheel. And it changed how I drive. Like, I became more cognizant of the vehicles around me, and I anticipated the stale and fresh lights, and I learned all those things that truckers have to know. And not only that, it just gave me the opportunity to truly appreciate what professional drivers do, the skills they have, the backing, the shifting, all of that. And I've been able to enjoy so many experiences since getting my license. Normally, my driving is restricted to driving opportunities of new equipment with manufacturers, whether it be in Canada or the US, sometimes even overseas. So maybe I get behind the wheel 12 times a year. Not as much as I'd like to, because it's my favorite time of it's my favorite part of the job, but it's just enough to really, keep the rust off and appreciate truly what drivers go through.
So what's been your favorite test drive, that chance that you got to get out there with another piece of equipment? What was something that's very memorable?
I'd say that the most memorable experience I've had throughout my 20 years came, I think, around 2016, when Daimler Trucks North America introduced their Inspiration truck, which was a self-driving truck. And they did it in Vegas, and they actually won a Guinness Book of World Records for the most lumens in a presentation, because they broadcast this show on the Hoover Dam, and it was just spectacular. Now, that truck was just there for us to see. A couple months later, they called a few of us that had our licenses, and they said, come to Nevada and you can drive the truck. But first, and this is a funny thing about it, it's a self-driving truck, but before you can drive it, you need to take a course. So I said, okay, well, that's fine. It's funny you have to take a course to learn how to drive a truck that drives itself. But us few journalists were the first people outside of Daimler Engineers that actually got the Nevada certification to drive a self-driving truck. And then we got to take it on the road. And it was such a cool experience. The instinct is to grab the wheel when you're coming up on a corner, especially with another truck coming your way. But very quickly, I learned to trust the technology. And that's something I'll always remember because, these trucks aren't going to be commercially available for many, many years to come. But I'll always remember being one of the first to get the chance to drive one, which is a pretty cool experience.
Yeah, I remember you writing the articles on that, and I could actually feel the excitement and energy you had writing those articles and talking about this experience and having to become certified to drive something that's self-driving. It's like,
right.
Excuse me?
It was such a new technology. So there was that, and also the fact that you needed two people in a self-driving truck, whose whole purpose is to eliminate the driver. You need two instead of one, but it's just because it's new technology, and they're just cautious in how they deploy them.
But I love the way Dave said that you wrote with such excitement that he could just literally feel that coming through the pages to him. That's a talent in itself. Besides knowing how to back up well and how to handle those vehicles, being able to convey that message to people is fantastic.
Well, that's a compliment. I really appreciate that, Dave, because that's my job, to convey that sort of excitement and enthusiasm, but also the information. So I appreciate that.
Well, you've been in this business quite a while, and it's been a constant thing for you. Once you got involved with Truck News, there's been other journalists that have stepped away and done other things and then come back, but this is where you've been the whole time since you started at Truck News. Is that right? I believe that's
right.
And
I've endured. We've gone through changes of ownership, and they're always unsettling, but they've always worked out better for me. The biggest change, of course, was a couple of years ago. We discontinued the print editions of Truck News and Truck West, and that kind of hit me hard because it was a big part of my identity, for almost 20 years. But it was the right decision because of the way that we're consuming news now. These were primarily news magazines, and by the time they come out in print, they're dated. So, all that should go to the website. But they didn't kick me out to the curb. They made me editor of Today's Trucking, which is a great magazine as well, which is more of a traditional feature-oriented magazine. It's a pure magazine in the sense of the word. And I've really enjoyed that, especially since it's just kept me in the industry that I love. And things are going really well. And I report to John G. Smith, who left and came back, and it's come full circle since that time that I was in college, watching the guy from Truck News and kind of snickering, saying, "There's no way I'm going to do that with my life."
Now, with them going to all digital, are you doing their social media for them too?
Yeah, well, we have an editorial team, and we all play a role in that.
Okay.
We've got an associate editor, Leo, who's very involved in the Facebook and the Twitter, and I have my own Twitter account that I like to have because I like to insert a little bit of personal opinion now and again. And I like to have my face out there. And then, so we have the Truck News feeds and the Today's Trucking feeds. We kept the trucknews.com website because, let's be honest, there's no better URL to have than that for what we do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there's been lots of changes, and that's can be said for any kind of publishing outlet, but they've all been for the positive.
Well, I remember when, I won't soon forget the phone call you and I had, James. Maybe you don't remember, but I remember after hearing about the changes that were happening with the whole industry, and I wasn't actually working for you at the time. Do a little bit of freelance work for Today's Trucking once in a great while, but I wasn't doing anything consistent like I am now, and I wasn't looking for anything. I just called you up because it was hurting me to see that change happening, and I was concerned, and I really needed reassurance from you that you were going to be okay and that you were going to stay around in the business, because I don't know, there's been, even though we've not worked together until the last year, I've seen you I've seen you from the early days to now, and it's been fun to see you and to be part of watching you survive and still have the passion for the industry. How do you keep that passion going after all these years? Because I think it's only stronger now than it was before.
Yeah, and you know what? To be honest with you, if if I were no longer able to write or edit a trucking magazine, I'd probably go do something completely different, probably within trucking, because I find myself more of a truck person than I do an editor, to be honest with you. After all these years, I've been immersed in this industry, and I've become very passionate about it, and I've got a lot of friends in it and a lot of contacts in it. So I would probably find something else to do in trucking before I'd go be the editor of Pizza Today or some other business-to-business magazine that serves a completely different industry. Although Pizza Today might not be a bad one. That's probably a bad example.
Free pizza.
Yeah,
I like the idea of the samples. Like that's where my head went.
Sure. Yeah, that's maybe one I would consider. But outside of that, I think of myself more of a trucking industry person than a publishing person, to be completely honest with you. And it's an industry that I want to stay in one way or another. If publishing were to cease to exist, which it won't, because people still need quality information. How they get it is going to evolve, but they still need that information. But if it were to cease to exist, I would find something to do in trucking. Probably not be a driver. I don't think I have it in me. I'll be completely honest. I mean, that's a hard job, and I have so much appreciation for the people that do it, including you, Dave. It is not an easy job, and if I were to spend 10 hours in my car, I can do that once a month, maybe. Can't do that day in, day out, especially in a truck where you've got so many additional pressures. You really have to safeguard everyone around you and be aware of everyone around you and plan for the unplannable, the crazy things that they're going to do around you, because you don't have the ability to just stop on a dock.
Well, I was driving with my dad the other day because I was close by him in the Toronto area, GTA, and he was pointing out some new condos that were going up, and he's like, "Can you imagine living in that?" And I'm like, "Dad, that is still many, many times bigger, many times bigger than my truck." I said, "I could live in that condo." After living in my truck, I got, very few square feet in my truck. Like, condo would be huge for me. Mm-hmm. I just spent almost a month in my truck. And so anyway, yeah, we just heard an ambulance in the background, and that was one of our 10 codes that Bridget was talking about, and she got I
said I wasn't going to use the emergency 10 code today, and then there's an ambulance in the background, so I guess we got one anyway, just out of chance. So I do have a question about the industry for you, though, James. Mm-hmm. In my world, in agriculture, we know that right now there's so many things going on that are delaying products to market, whether it's the product that a farmer needs to get to the farm, or from the farm to the processors and on. And a lot of that has to do with just the backlog that's going on in trucking. So one of the things that I have been told is part of the backlog is because we didn't see nearly as many people trained in as drivers last year in 20, because it would have been too close contact in the same cab, et cetera. Have you heard the same? Have you done any stories on something like that about why we're behind?
Yeah, tons. Size matters, tons. Okay. And it really is a perfect storm. There, as you alluded to, there were no new entrants into the industry, and that goes in the US and Canada. At the same time, more people accelerated their retirements because they didn't want to be out there in a pandemic. They wanted to look after their safety. So you've got the shortage of people. You also have people that took other jobs doing package delivery close to home, because that was booming, and they could be home every night. So we lost a lot of truckers to that. And now, to make matters worse, there's tons of demand for freight, and the supply chain backlogs have kept truck makers unable to build the trucks. The orders have been through the roof, and they just can't produce them because they're lacking semiconductors, just like the car makers. They're lacking tires, steel at times, so many things. And so the industry forecasters that we follow estimate that there are 25,000 Class 8 trucks that are built and then parked in fields and parking lots, anywhere they can, waiting for the final parts before they can be shipped to the end users. So what this has done is it's just kept a lid on the number of trucks and drivers. And meanwhile, demand is through the roof. And then you just couple that with everything else that's going on in the broader supply chain. I mean, the ships that are just out at anchor, there's a record number of ships off the ports in the West Coast because they just can't get them unloaded. And then when they do, there's not the trucks. And so it's a real mess right now. And it's been actually really positive for truckers because rates are going up. Because, when there's not the capacity, but there's the demand, rates go up. So truckers are making money and it's saving them from themselves because what they normally do when times are good, they buy new trucks, they hire more drivers, and then the rates go back down because they've added too much capacity. So this time they've been saved from themselves because they can't get drivers, they can't get trucks, rates are going up, they're making more money, but it's just affecting everything. It's affecting the cost of things in your grocery store. It's affecting your ability to get things in a timely manner from China. So it is having a huge impact, and it's interesting to hear that you're seeing that in agriculture as well.
Oh, tremendously. And I don't see this as a quick turnaround situation, whether in price or in fixing the backlog. And again, we see it just like you're talking about with trucks. You're not getting the parts that you need for farm equipment, whether it's in tractors, whether it's ordering a new combine. Yesterday on Twitter, there was a discussion about what's the lead time to get new equipment. And we're talking pretty much 18 to 24 months if you placed your orders now. Utility vehicles, so like UTVs, ATVs, that type of thing, at least a year to see some of that stuff. So we realize the backlog that's happening. And when you said you're not getting parts to build new trucks, I don't think those of us who drive passenger cars realize that's happening in the freight trucks as well, because I just got a different pickup. And I can tell you, I feel like it's a very stripped down model. I'm calling it the COVID model. Because there's things in there that would have been a feature or would have been done better by the manufacturer, but I don't think they could in order to just let's put this thing together and get it on the road. Mm-hmm. And we as consumers are forgetting that's happening with your trucks too, which leads me to my next question, because I keep hearing this discussion how, for instance, the state of California, and it's probably happening in your very urban areas like Toronto and Quebec, they're going to electric cars. Mm-hmm. How are you going to have an electric truck?
You can have an electric truck. We have a few of them. Dane Ross has one in Quebec. Purelator has one in British Columbia. Bison Transport is testing two. Okay. Not in your neck of the woods, but in BC, because that's where the incentives are right now. But eventually they might work there. There are trucks commercially available today. Volvo has one. A Daimler, I think, is commercially producing. If not, they will be very soon. And then you've got all these startups, tons of startups. Lion is commercially producing their startup from Quebec. I shouldn't call them a startup. They've been around for 10 years, but primarily in school buses. And they produce a wide range of trucks now. And then you've got Tesla, who keeps talking about producing a truck, but hasn't actually done it yet. And you've got Nikola. And then you've got a whole bunch of others that have jumped in and done a clean sheet design from the ground up of an electric vehicle. They work. I've had the chance to drive them, and they're a lot of fun because they've got instant torque. They're soundless. They're so quiet. Dave, you would love them. They just, don't smell like diesel at the end of the day. The problem is they have a lot of limitations because, and I'm not implying that you smell like diesel, Dave, but they have their limitations.
There's diesel in my veins, James,
sure.
So I
only
still
when you're
have
sweating.
diesel. Yeah.
The problem is they right now they have a lot of limitations. They're heavy, so your payload is restricted, and they can only do a certain range. So they only suit a small number of applications at the moment. They work great for those applications. And then the company has to be very committed because they've got to invest in installing chargers. There's incentives in Quebec and BC and some other provinces, but those are the two that seem to be leading. So electric trucks are coming, but they're coming in certain applications first, and it won't be long haul for a long, long time, probably until we have fuel cells. But, it's an exciting time because it's going to be forced. I mean, government is going to force the transition to electric vehicles. And it's going to be really interesting to see how that evolves.
So when you said that, you don't want to insinuate someone smells like diesel, just remember if it's biodiesel, then you just smell like a French fry.
Good point. That's not so bad.
Talking about fuel efficiency, though, James, I think you saw this yesterday on Twitter. Hellbent Hagen, he's always pushing his Maconomics and Mac every penny count and stuff like that. He's always speccing his trucks and paying a lot of attention to fuel economy. And if I hadn't got caught up sitting on my new swing outside the house this morning, I would have crunched some numbers. I started looking at what it costs to move each pound down the highway in our new trucks. And I'm going to explore that further. But just as an aside for the electric truck and the efficiency discussion, when you look at yesterday, I was getting 24 liters per 100 kilometers running at 60,000 pounds with 18 wheels. And if you would look at a car getting 8 liters per 100K with the weight they're carrying, I'm going to crunch the numbers, but I think my reason thinking right now is our engines and our trucks are way more efficient than passenger cars, pound for pound.
I'm really interested to seeing the results of your calculations, because that wouldn't surprise me. I mean, what we've done with diesel over the past decade has been pretty amazing, and it was painful, as you know, with the early generation
Very
after treatment
painful
systems. But now that they've got them sorted out, and they were probably just brought to market too early, it's amazing how efficient you can be. And I love watching the posts from Hellbent Hagen. I think it's fascinating. And these guys, and there's a handful of them on there, they voluntarily use driver coaching tools like the pedal coach, and they do it because they want to be the best that they can be. And you know, it's those types of tools that I think can make people a better driver if you have an open mind. I mean, they also attract haters, because there are those that say, well, that's just, I know how to drive a truck. But when you can't analyze your performance, like when you can't see it, can you possibly be better, or do you think that you're doing just fine all the time? I mean, and the numbers are there, and his fuel economy is absolutely incredible, and yours I'm sure is too, Dave. And I really want to see those results, because I think that heavy trucks have become much more efficient. When you look at what's been done on the passenger car side of things, is, pales in comparison.
Well, I want to I'm going to explore that, and I think as an industry we should maybe be promoting that more to the general public. Like, look at what we are doing. This is what it costs to run a pound of whatever down the road compared to what you're doing in your SUV right now. So I had with that Hellbent Hagen tweet yesterday, he had said he was running at 70 miles per hour and he was getting like double digit fuel economy, over 10 miles per gallon, or somewhere around 10 miles per gallon. And I was feeling at 70 miles an hour. And I was all excited because I was running 9.7 miles per gallon, US miles per gallon, miles per US gallon. And I was all excited because that's the best I've done with this truck. And I'm trying to hit 10, and I didn't quite get there. I got to 9.8 yesterday, but my daily average yesterday was 9.7 miles per US gallon.
That's great. And you probably had a headwind. If you had a tailwind, you would have been over 10.
Depends on who's asking.
Let's not tell all the trade secrets, kids. We don't all need to know that.
So we'll leave that part behind. Bridget, you had something more for James.
Well, of course. And my question is this. There's a story here that apparently I don't know. And that is for you, James. How did you get from your freelance work to editor? I don't think that just happens in a phone call and overnight.
No, well, it happens when they're paying you by the story and you keep coming up with enough stories that they realize it'd be cheaper just to hire them. That's how that happens.
Oh, now I know.
Cover them up. I like it.
So, I was producing enough that they just realized it'd be cheaper to hire the guy as an assistant editor. And then from there, I spent a few more years in Calgary, and then Ontario was home. It was always my intent to come back home. So then the editor who I was working for at the time of Truck News in 2005 took another job and opened up that position. And it was just a natural time for me to put forward my name and get back home, and never look back. So I was from 2005 until, years go by so quick now, until about 2010, I would guess. No, 2015 or so. I was the editor in Toronto, and then Newcom bought us. And they were our rivals, our longtime rivals, the publishers of Today's Trucking.
Yep.
And, of course, that's a little nerve wracking. What are they going to do? Are they just going to shut us down? No, they actually invested in the magazines, which was great to see, right up to the point where we sort of streamlined them and went digital with the Truck News brand. And then here I am with today's trucking.
It's come a long way with the digital side of things. It's much more at the forefront now, and it's pretty cool to see
I
how
love
that's
the web.
going.
I love it because of the immediacy. And it used to be the beginning of my career, I'd go to an event and then there'd be no urgency to write it up. I'd be, okay, well, production's a month away. I don't have to really have it done till then because no one was consuming news online. Now, when I go to an event, I'm live tweeting during the event. And then, I'm telling the story almost in real time. And then I'm writing a day of, posting it. The website has no constraints when it comes to length, when it comes to the amount of images you can use. You can put up a photo gallery. I've come to love the web. At first I didn't because it just created so much pressure to get things turned around so quickly. And now I love it. It's a great tool. And many times it's a better storytelling tool than the printed page.
And so I think that's a great point when you said you're not limited by word count. You're not limited by photos. And people, I'm a fast reader and I can skim through there and find what I want. But I think that it's just so good when you're reading it online. People can be even faster. They can search you. They can find you better than they can in just a print edition because there's so much more availability across the board for them to find you and your story.
And they can become engaged. They can leave comments. They can respond to a tweet or retweet. They can they can actually get involved themselves. If I'm at an event and I make a tweet about something and they've got a particular question about that product, they can ask it and I can forward that question to the engineer, whoever I'm speaking to. So it really is different. Now, having said that, I'm a little bit old school too, and I still love the printed magazine because, it's just something that you can hold in your hand and it's special. A printed magazine is special. There are certain magazines like Sports Illustrated that I still want the printed magazine. It's nothing beats it for longer features and for stuff like that, but both have their place.
No, I love there's it's the same way for me. There's when the printed version is still a favorite for me. I love turning the pages. I love the smell of the magazines, and reading. I know for my articles, reading my articles online is cool, but when I see it in print, that's a completely different thing. It's like, I don't know how many years I've been doing it, but I still love it. So as a journalist student, James, was part of your hesitation with the internet, with the web-based stuff, because of biases from the past? Or like, I know some journalists were like, oh, that's just anybody can write and there's not enough oversight. And let's face it, there's a lot of articles online that are really poorly written. Has that been some of the hesitation? Or
well, I haven't been hesitant in a long time. I mean, when the website, like when I graduated from college, the web was in its infancy. So it wasn't even a factor. I don't even know if the newspaper I was at the time had a website. Probably didn't. We were still writing out stories and then printing them and then taking an X-Acto blade and pasting them, and it was a very manual process. But that really dates me. But
not so much. Yeah. I worked on my high school yearbook in much the same way, so I totally get it.
I feel better. You're right. The internet opens up. It's a free for all, and I would say it's not so prevalent in our industry. But yeah. I mean, just look at the fake news that's prevalent on all over social media and the website. Anyone that wants a voice and can work a computer can set up a WordPress blog and have their opinions out there. A lot of those opinions are really misinformed, but I think that makes us even more valuable with the long history we have as a trusted source of information. I think it really benefits us because it differentiates us from some of those other cats out there.
They even let anybody do podcasts now. It's like, it's crazy.
They encourage it, which is just insane. I don't know why people do that.
Yeah. So no, because I we all saw some of the big publishing companies that had a real disdain for internet and web-based stuff, and it pretty much killed them. So it's been good to see how I say this all the time in trucking. We are the most flexible and adaptable industry there is. There is no other industry that has had so many restrictions put on, whether it's fuel economy or whether it's hours of service or whether it's regulations going from one state and province to another, one country to another. There's nobody that has had so many different restrictions as trucking, and we still seem to bounce back. We still seem to find a way to make it work. We take these trucks that were horrible in 2007 and here we are talking about 10 miles per gallon US gallon as just a regular thing.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing. It really is. And we've seen that firsthand over the last couple of years during this pandemic. The fact that the trucking industry continued to operate almost uninterrupted is just, it's mind blowing.
But even the things that were able to be done to keep it operating. So I think back to North Dakota, Manitoba, Saskatchewan had a deal made where we'd help vaccinate drivers down here because we needed to keep things flowing and moving. And that's a sign of the flexibility and adaptability of the industry, as well as the people who work within it, making sure that those things keep happening. And again, shortage of drivers really made a difference, wanting to keep everybody who could be on the road.
And the amazing thing about that program between North Dakota and Manitoba is, how slow government moves most of the time. How quickly were they able to put this together? Where within a couple of days of floating the idea out there, they had a clinic set up on the side of the road. I mean, that's pretty remarkable, and that was driven by the trucking industry.
Yeah, we're not good at moving at the speed of light, just in general as two countries. But I think for us anyway, it seemed like we sort of kept the federal government out of it a little bit and just did it with state government. So nice work there, kids.
Yeah,
it's all state stuff. And then other provinces were like, hey, what about us? What about us?
Hey, you don't have an interstate coming in here. Back away slowly.
Yeah, that was a great program and really successful by the looks of the numbers.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it is. I know a lot of Manitoba truckers that have taken advantage of that, as was their right, and has been very good for them. So,
as a consumer, thank you for taking advantage of it, because in my own selfish way, it just meant that things got where they needed to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, James, one of the things that you mentioned earlier is you're a truck guy.
Mm-hmm.
So, having gone to some classic truck shows, vintage equipment, what's the favorite vehicle that you've seen, or what's one that really sticks in your mind?
Oh, geez, you're putting me on the spot. You're talking about classic trucks, right?
Well, yeah, of course. Okay. I'm putting you on the spot. I didn't come here to paint.
She has a classic pickup.
Yeah. I can't go out there and name a current brand. We'd lose the other 5-6 OEMs as advertisers.
This is your personal opinion. Everybody likes a classic.
Yeah. I'm always drawn to the classic cab over Kenworths, just because that's the first thing I was around as a kid. And my grandpa, he had a sawmill and a lumber company just outside Norwood, Ontario, on Highway 7, just west of town. And he had a bunch of these old cab over Kenworths to move the lumber and the logs. And I was always climbing around those trucks, and getting back in the sleeper was one of the greatest places to go when you're playing hide and seek. And so that just brings back some nostalgia. And I would love to someday, it's never going to happen, I'm sure. Otherwise, I probably already would have. I would love to go to a classic truck show and see one of those trucks having been picked out of a junkyard somewhere and restored. But, they're green and yellow. And I just remember how cool they were at the time. And so I've got a special personal attachment to that particular truck. And that would have been back in the 70s. So the trucks probably would have been from late 60s, early 70s.
Do you come across guys who restore semis like that very often?
Yeah, well, at the shows I do.
At the shows you do, because it just, I know classic car guys, and some do a really great job, and some are just the home improvement type fellows that put these cars together. Yeah, they're like even rat rods. But I think it takes a very special class of person to do the semis, because they're just such a bigger project. And
expensive. But you know what? The classic truck shows, Clifford is the biggest one that and in Ontario for sure, I would say probably all Canada. And it actually gets bigger every year. And I'm surprised by that because you don't see a lot of young people restoring trucks. And I don't know if you ever will, but the older guys in the industry who are doing it love it. And they keep finding old trucks to restore. I just wonder what's going to happen if that will be picked up by the younger generation.
There are a few, like when I've been at the Jamboree down in Walcott, Iowa, and at some of the other places, I definitely see some younger people taking trucks, and maybe not old ones, but taking glider type trucks and making them work for themselves. Part of the problem is strictly the expense,
Right.
and I believe that a lot of these young guys today, if they stay in the industry, they're going to look back and say, I want to have one of those trucks. And when I can make enough money that I don't need that money, I can put it into that old cab over Kenworth or whatever, and I think it's still going to keep going. It just, things don't get cheaper, and the trucking industry it's sometimes hard to make money, but
the great thing about those, and I hope you're right, Dave, and the great thing about those old trucks is that they're just so unique and they all look different. Whereas, I remember a guy saying you line up a whole bunch of trucks today, doesn't matter what make or model they are, they'll throw the same shadow on the ground. those older trucks are so identifiable and unique.
Yeah, very cool.
That's the best part. It's like old classic cars. There's always something that stands out about them. And it becomes kind of your favorite detail, like the big fins on a mid 1950s Bel Air, or the porthole windows on later 50s Ford Thunderbird convertibles. I mean, there's always that detail that sticks in your mind.
Yeah, and we've lost that, and we've had to lose that because in order to be efficient, all the truck makers have had to take similar designs and aerodynamic cues and fairings that look the same and do the same, and it's just the trucks have lost their individuality, and unfortunately, but it's been necessary in order to get that great mileage that you're getting, David.
Yeah, my boss, this is the first time we got 4 new trucks this year. Not the first time for getting 4 new trucks, but the first time he had to get something that's not a big nose, and it hurts him. Like he wants to have, he just wants the old style, and it doesn't pay. It doesn't pay. And so I drive a 579, and he still, there's still some things about it that look old school and everything, but it hurts him. He would love to have the big nose again, but he just can't make any money with it.
Tell him to spend money on a pretty paint job. That'll cost him less.
Hey, we have our frame rails and everything painted the same color as the truck. Like it, we got a back window in the truck, in the sleeper, all these special little things here.
And that's a great point, Bridget. That's where your individuality has to come from these days, and the paint scheme, how you customize it and make it your own in the interior. I mean, it's not going to be about the shape of the truck itself necessarily, but there's still ways you can dress it up and throw some chicken lights on there, maybe.
Something to make it look fun. I like the idea of the lights, except when one goes out and you got to try to find that short in the line.
Believe me, that's a lot better than it used to be.
I bet.
Oh man, I got all excited when one of the first trucks I drove, I put lights all over it.
And then you realize what a pain that was.
I spent a lot of time fixing wiring and trying to keep those lights going, and they weren't LEDs like you can have nowadays.
Yeah, and don't you just the trucks look great when they're all decked out in lights, but don't you just risk the heighten the risk of getting a citation? Because even if one of those is out, even though you've got 100 times more lights on than you need, you still run the risk of, and you're easier to see going down the road than any other truck out there. It just seems unfortunate.
Yeah, you could have 100. Did you realize that size matters? You could have 100 lights on your truck, and you may only need like 15 of them. But if one of them goes out and it's not covered up and it still looks like a light, you can still get a ticket for that.
Yep, that's exactly right.
There's a life hack there from Crazy Canuck. Cover it up with a piece of tape, and then you won't get that. Okay.
Yeah. Put a piece of duct tape over it, or that's what we end up doing.
I'm not your priest to your mother. Do what you have to do.
um, James, we like to ask our guests about one particular, if you're sitting around a campfire, shooting the breeze with friends, what's one trip experience that you look back on and say, you tell this story around the campfire almost every time?
Well, for the sake of entertainment, I'll tell you a story, but I don't usually tell it around a campfire because it makes me look pretty bad. It's a
Oh
little
no,
bit
but
of
I
an
like the way
embarrassing
this
story.
is starting. I really like how this is
This is
starting
going
so
good.
far. Yeah.
I told you that I learned how to drive on an 18-speed manual in Calgary, double clutching, of course, and I had never driven in a standard car of any type. So in some sense, it was a better way to learn because I didn't have bad habits that I had to break. So my first trip since I got licensed was overseas to Sweden to do a test drive. And they had these new trucks. We're going to drive up the high coast of Sweden, very curvy, hilly landscape. And it was to see the new I-shift. Now, this isn't the I-shift that you know. This was, as I later came to find out, a synchronized manual I-shift, which never came to North America. So first of all, we go over there, and I'm so excited to use my new Class 1 license and do the test drive. They treat us, they wine us and dine us the night before. And then the morning of, they say, okay, well, hope you had fun last night. We have some breathalyzers here. And I thought, oh, geez. Well, what if I don't pass the breathalyzer after coming all the way to Sweden? How's this going to look? First time trying to use my license. Fortunately, that was fine. I was okay to drive. So then we go and we get in the trucks, and this was an international event. So they had journalists there from around the world speaking all kinds of different languages. And the sleeper got full of journalists from places like Romania and Russia. And since I had the license, I was able to drive. And then I had a Volvo engineer beside me. So we had a fully loaded timber truck, double trailers, and a ridiculous amount of horsepower. And I start to ease out of neutral and shift gears and jerk, stall. And everyone's looking at me like I'm crazy. And I'm like, what's happening here? So then I started the truck, jerk, stall again. And now the Volvo engineer is starting to get a little antsy. The people in the back are chuckling. And I'm like, what is happening? And finally, we figure out I'm trying to double clutch a synchronized transmission. So the guys in the back from other parts of the world are like, what's with this? He's one of those crazy North Americans that drives in a ridiculous manner. And once I found out, the synchronized transmission was great, but I'd never driven a car with a synchronized transmission. So it was a whole new way of shifting, which I had to figure out on the fly with a full load in the high coast. And once I got the hang of it, it was great. It was a lot easier than double clutching, but at the same time, it just wasn't something I was used to. So I've still to this day never driven another vehicle with a synchronized manual transmission. But I learned how in the most unusual and uncomfortable circumstances. The Swedish guy was like, accelerator. It's a bad Swedish accent, but he's just yelling at me, trying to figure out what I was doing wrong to stop the truck. Anyways, I don't tell that story often for obvious reasons.
I understand, but I love the fact that let's just add these things up. I got a guy from Switzerland yelling at me while I have a load of timber and a truck I've never driven. Yeah, this is going to go great.
And they had roundabouts on the highway. When I got a double trailer full of logs, roundabouts. Yeah. I've never encountered one of those in a truck before. So, add it all up, it was a very stressful day. And it's a good job that I think the next morning I probably would have failed the breathalyzer because when I got back from that, I needed to have a few to settle the nerves.
I actually had a Volvo with a synchronized transmission. And it was a 95 WIA Volvo. And you had to clutch. You could not shift without the clutch. And it was a weird transmission, but it worked. Once I figured it out, it worked really well. And actually had a guy from South Africa. He was doing some mechanical work up here. And I got him to look at it for me because my mechanic thought the transmission was gone. So we took it out and took it to this mechanic. And, oh, this is a beautiful transmission. I love these. They're all over Africa and they're great. Bulletproof, and he says nothing wrong with your transmission, just something wrong with your mechanic. that cost me a lot of money to figure out that transmission was good.
The funny thing is, the other parts of the world, South Africa even, Europe are so far ahead of us when it comes to things with automated transmissions and disc brakes and some of these technologies. We're a little bit resistant here in North America to adapt them. And so it's interesting you can go and see trucking in Europe and get a good idea of what's going to be here in 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
And that's a great point. That's even the case with passenger cars. If you, especially like Germany, you see what's happening over there. It doesn't take very long before it transitions over here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it usually originates there.
Yes.
Yeah. Actually, the first article that you ever did for me, James, was I wrote an article about a Norwegian truck driver.
Yeah.
And you even remember that?
I do. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yetel was his name. And
okay, guys.
I had gone over and I was in Norway and I got him to talk to me about trucking. And I had one of my friends out there take pictures and whatnot. And I wrote this article that wasn't going to work for the magazine, but you put it online for me.
Mm-hmm. I remember.
Nice.
To be perfectly honest, remember, I live in North Dakota. I live in a place where there's an awful lot of immigration that occurred from Norway back in the late 1800s, turn of the century, 1900s. And so there's a lot of Norwegian jokes over here. So as soon as you started with the Norwegian truck driver, I went, so it's an Ole and Lena joke. Just waiting for the rest of it.
No.
Okay.
So James, if you look at your name,
I noticed that.
Yeah, I kind of changed it. We're trying to come up with a CB handle for you. And yeah, so Jimmy.
All right.
As in the old Jimmy cab over. It's not a Kenworth cab over, but I like to try and make something work with your name and everything.
That works.
And so,
thanks.
Jimmy.
There's a lot worse things that you could call me. So I'll take that, David.
So really, maybe we went off the rails a little bit with some of the stuff here, but we generally like to have organic conversations and just see where things go. Really appreciate you coming on board and being on the other end of the interview process. And I appreciate that. I recommend you as a guest to anybody.
Well, thanks, guys. That was a lot of fun. And I always try to keep my interviews casual, too. I think it's the best way to do them. And it was a lot of fun chatting and really appreciate you having me. So,
Bridget, why don't you close us out?
Thank you again to Jimmy, as he's got his new handle, and for joining us today, because it's been kind of fun to talk about a diverse amount of topics. I mean, what's going on right in the forefront and headlines of trucking, but then also just reaching back and finding out some of those fun things about your story and history too. So thank you for that. Again, to everybody who's listening, we really appreciate your time, attention. Feel free to give us a rating on your favorite podcast platform. And better yet, send us any comments or information at crazycanucktruckin@gmail.com or on our social media.
And remember to check out VIP's social media, Redesign Social. If you need marketing help or help with branding your stuff, then get VIP. You can check her out in our show notes, Redesign Social. So thank you very much, Jimmy. It's been really good. And I'll get those numbers crunched for you on the fuel economy, and we'll go from there. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.